Hello everyone, and welcome back to some Java object-oriented programming tutorials. Now our main tutorials are done, but as you know, people watch them, things crop up. Sometimes there's some errata or some additional topics that people want clarification for, and that's what this video is for, and hopefully this will be the only one, but we'll see. The first good news: no errata, no mistakes so far, but there are a bunch of clarifications that perhaps, it's possible I didn't give as good an explanation for, or there's certain topics that I skipped over that people kind of really wanted to know. So that's kind of the place for this. In this menu here, you're going to see that we have three classes. One is called Book. One is called Bookshelf. We've seen these classes before, but just to kind of refresh our memories, we have a book. It has three variables, and there's a constructor, which is automatically going to get called for it. And then we have one method called readBook, which literally just prints out a message saying book read. So some of the questions and confusions that I got had to do with extending classes. So let's imagine that I wanted to have a textbook. And a textbook was going to have all of the same things as a book, except maybe it'll also be assigned to a particular classroom. So we want to add an extra variable to represent that. And in order to do that, and I've already got us started here, is you create a new class, a separate file over here, and you add in the keyword extends book. And what that's telling Java is that you want to take all of the properties of that book and you want to add more stuff to it. Now, the first thing you're going to notice is that there's an error here. And this error is going to highlight the first problem that you sometimes have when extending it. And that is that this new textbook is going to inherit all of the properties and methods of book except the constructors. Constructors do not get inherited because typically when you extend something, you're going to want to have a new way of constructing it. And so that's one issue that's cropping up here, is that I need to create a new constructor, and that constructor needs to match what I have over here. Now most IDEs like Java like NetBeans are going to allow you to do it for you. So here it says add constructor. And right away, it's going to add in a constructor here for me. And it's going to be called textbook to match this. And then here's the first bit of confusion that some people had, is there's this word called super. And super is basically just a way, when you're extending a class, what you're doing is you're creating a subclass. And the class that you're extending from is called a superclass. And you can get direct access to methods and variables from that other class using this keyword called super. And so what has been done here is it's saying, you know what, all I really want to do is to go to my super class, go to that book class, call its constructor, and pass this parameter into it. So what this code is going to do is when you go to construct a textbook, it will see this code, it will jump into the book, jump into the constructor for that book, and do the work that's placed over here. That's really useful because if you already have a constructor in book that's assembling it the way that you want, you might as well make use of that in your textbook. You can certainly add more stuff. And so with that class, if I wanted, I could go ahead and assign class name some sort of a value here. And so it's going to create a book, and now it's going to assign some sort of a class to it. So I'm going to give you another example of super in just a second. Another tricky concept that people had was the difference between overriding and overloading. Those are two new terms. And I really only talked about one of them, but I should probably disambiguate them. So when we talk about overloading a method, what we're talking about is having many methods with the same name, and so I can override them, and the only rule to overriding is that they need to have a different signature. And signature means that the name and the number of parameters taken together have to be unique. So I could have 10 of these, I could have 50 of these, as long as there is a difference in the parameters that are being taken. And that's called overloading. I'm taking the method and I'm loading more uses and more instances of it there. Okay. There's also a concept of overriding. And so overriding a method is taking a method that existed in book and recreating that same method in textbook so that I can change the behavior. So let me show you an example of what I mean by that. Here's a method called readBook. It exists inside book, and therefore it also exists inside textbook. Right? That's one of the great beautiful things about extending it. So if I go to my bookshelf, I can say t.readBook, like it says over here, and it is going to go into my book and it is going to call this method and do it. But what if I wanted a textbook, the readBook method, to do something a little bit different? Well, that's where the concept of overriding a method comes in. So I can take this in my textbook and I can put in a method with the exact same name and I can change the behavior. So now it's going to say textbook read. And so now when I create a textbook in my bookshelf and I go and run it, it is going to run the readBook method from textbook first. That's it. It's because it looks there first. It looks at that first. Now things can get a lot more complicated for those of you that were asking for more clarification. We talked about this idea of super, right? So I can also use super here. I can call super.readBook. And so now what's going to happen is when I call readBook for my textbook, it is first going to go and check out the readBook and book, do it. Then it's going to finish that and come over here and do whatever extra work that I want to be done. And to prove that to you, we're going to actually just run this. Oops. We're going to wait. And you can see it is going to do both of those. So I have overridden the method in textbook, but by using this keyword, I have been able to I've been able to also make use of the method from the other class. You can see that when I said in the last lesson that object-oriented programming, it's like a huge world and I've only talked about a little bit of it, I really mean it. Like there's still a lot more that we haven't covered here. So let me just see. We've covered most of the big topics that came out. Extending, good. Then there was also another question along with super, another constructor. It's going to cause some problems, but it's okay. It'll be good for what we want to do here. Int p, and we're also going to say string image. Okay. So you're going to notice that I have a variable inside my class and it happens to be called image. I also have a parameter in here and it happens to be called image. When I come down here and I say image equals image, we've got a problem. This is ambiguous. Maybe. Which image am I referring to? Am I just assigning image to itself, or am I assigning the image from the class to the parameter being placed in here? Now personally, I always try to avoid ambiguity like this, and I would change the name of this, but Java does settle ambiguity, and it settles ambiguity with scope, just like it does with everything else. You've come across this when we talked about if statements. You know, if you have a variable inside an if statement, it disappears when you're outside the if statement. In this case, what happens is it's always going to look to the variable that's closest in its scope. And so in this case, image equals image will mean set this variable to equal what this variable is. In other words, it's not really going to do anything. When I want to refer to the image that exists in the class as a whole, in order to help me identify that scope, Java has a keyword this, which is saying, please refer to this object. And so what I can do is I can use that here by saying this dot. And now we have the behavior that we are looking for. It is going to look for the image that belongs to this object, and it's going to assign it the image variable in this set of parameters. Very confusing, but hopefully this demonstration helped to explain it a little bit more. So that's it. I mean, keep the good questions coming. If I get enough good questions, I'll have a follow-up video with some more clarifications and explanations about object-oriented programming. Otherwise, keep coding on.